Crabbing hacks and tricks. Now I have the secret crabbing tips just for you. What is up, Outdoor Mavericks? Welcome back to the channel to another crabbing tips video where today I'm going to unveil some secrets when it comes to crabbing in the form of hacks and tricks. After years and years of crabbing, I love trying new baits, learning new things when it comes to crabbing and how to be more efficient on the water and catch more big Dungeness crabs. And I've always enjoyed a hack or a trick to help me be a better crabber. So if you want to catch more crabs and be better at crabbing, I have just the 10 hacks and tricks for you. Now coming in at number 10 is waterproof and rubberized gloves. Now, not the most sexiest hack or trick, but rubberized gloves will help you in multiple different ways when it comes to crabbing. Firstly, you get those rubberized waterproof gloves, they're going to keep your hands warm all year long, especially in those cold winter days out crabbing. They're going to keep your little fingers nice and warm as you're pulling up the crab pots. And then secondly, with those rubberized gloves, you're able to pull the rope much easier when you're crabbing from a boat. You got long lines and long traps out. Having that extra grip's going to help you get those slip rings or those rings up nice and quickly so that you don't lose any crabs out of the traps. And then thirdly, when you're handling crabs, the rubberized gloves are really good, so even if you get pinched, you got a bit of a barrier so you're not cutting your fingers up or letting those crab pinchers get you right on your flesh. Don't ask me how I know. And honestly, any other glove is just not going to do the trick when it comes to crabbing. And my favorite are the chili grips. They're nice and warm, they're rubberized, they last a long time, and if you get them smelly, just make them your dedicated crabbing gloves. Now, number 9 is a trick that you need for lighter traps and gear, which is to add additional weight or weights to your trap to keep them down on the bottom. Crab traps and crab gear come in different sizes and different weights. You've got your heavy version, heavy duty pots, which are going to go nowhere no matter how much the tide is ripping. But on the other spectrum, you've got your rings and your square foldable traps that are much lighter. And in order to keep those on the bottom, you can add some additional weights to them. Now, when you've got lighter traps and there's more flow in or out of the bay, your traps are going to get moved around quite a bit and you can lose your gear. It can head all the way out to the ocean and see you later. So what you can easily do is to take some zip ties and add some additional fishing weights or even coil some weights around the cage before you drop it in the water. And that extra weight will keep the traps down and it won't be moving the trap up and down the bay so you're having to search for your gear all the time. And in my estimation, go as heavy as you can on those lighter traps. Don't ask me how I know. Now, hack number 8 is one of my favorites, which is to add some tape about 10 feet from the trap so when you pull it up, you know that you're really close to pulling the crabs up to the surface. This is a great hack because the tape can give you an indicator so you know that the trap or the ring or the gear is right near the surface, so the captain can also put the boat in neutral so you're not continually going forward, and that you've got your gear right there. So if you need a hand when you got a really heavy pot full of a lot of keepers, somebody can come over and give you that extra hand. And the 10-foot tape marker is really good because when you've got 2 people in the boat and you've got 1 person driving, 1 person pulling pots, notifying them that you're 10 feet away from the trap hitting the surface is a great way to communicate back and forth on where you're at and how much line is still out. So as you're pulling up and you say, hey, 10 feet, you're getting really close and hopefully you got a lot of big ones. Now, trick number 7 has to do with bait, and that's to take your bait out of the freezer the night before or the morning of before you go crabbing. One of the biggest challenges with frozen fish or frozen crab or any other frozen bait that you have is that it can be so frozen together that you can't dislodge it to get it into the crab bait boxes within the traps because it's just one big block and it's stuck together because it's frozen. So one way to avoid that is to let your bait de-thaw overnight in a bucket that can get stinky. If there's some liquids that drip out, that's fine. Just place your bait out and let it thaw just a little bit. And in particular, now if you're going to brine some baits like chicken or fish heads with Procure or Smelly Jelly, you definitely want them to be more thawed because if you try to brine them frozen, it's not going to penetrate the meat and really be stuck in there and get the crab's attention and get that bait super smelly so the crabs are going to want to go for it. And if you got frozen chicken drumsticks together, there is no knife that you can use to get those things dislodged to get into the crab bait box. Trust me when I say I've had 5 knives that I've broken trying to dislodge frozen bait. Now, trick number 6 has to do with the measure, and that is to tie it either to the boat or a bucket so you don't lose it. And coming from experience and having thrown multiple measures over the boat, when I say tie it to something, I literally mean tie it to something so you don't lose it. When I go crabbing, I get so excited when I'm measuring crabs and I'm getting the big ones. I just willy-nilly toss the measure sometimes, and if it's not tied to something, I've been known to throw it over the side a little bit. My family, I guess, has a problem with this. My aunt's done it a bunch, my uncle's done it a bunch, my other uncle's done it a bunch. So tie up your measure. There's a little hole that should always be notched in it, and you can take a little piece of rope or even some fishing line, for heaven's sakes, if you can't find any rope. Tie it to a bucket or tie it to the boat, and that way you can't lose it, and you're always going to be able to make sure you go home with one, or at least have a measure on the boat. Now, trick number 5 again has to do with bait, and that is to add attractant to your bait. Yes, when it comes to crab bait, you should be brining a little bit of bait in some sort of Procure, Potski, smelly jelly attractant, and then use that bait to see if it's going to be better than normal chicken. And a lot of times, it definitely is. But it's really funny because a lot of crabbers do not use crab attractant. Now, I've proved time and time again that attractant really works if you want to get those numbers and the biggest dungeness crabs possible. So anytime you've got a plant crabbing trip, grab some attractant, brine up some of that bait, and then get ready for some big ones. And just remember, keep the attractant off your hands and your mouth. Now, hack and trick number 4 has to do with one of my favorite tools that I use when it comes to Dungeness crabbing, and that is using rubberized zip ties to help you tie stuff up. Now, when it comes to crabbing, we've all used the regular zip ties to tie our bait boxes, to tie our crab traps together, but one of the cool things about rubberized zip ties is you can reuse them a bunch. They're super strong, super sturdy, and they are really, really good and very versatile. On the boat with me at all times, I usually at least have a half dozen of the rubberized zip ties, because sometimes I just need to make sure that my trap is more secure and patched up, that if my bait box lid keeps coming undone, I just zip tie that shut. And you should always have zip ties in the boat no matter what, and they're a great thing to have in an emergency if you need to tie something up. Now, crabbing trick number 3 is to use an underwater camera inside your crab trap. Now, having a camera inside your crab trap is one of the best ways to get some information, learn how the crabs are reacting and responding to your bait, but also see how quickly they get there and what's going on the bay or the sea floor where you're crabbing. Using a camera, you can get a lot of great information. One of the ways I've been able to utilize it the best is to see how quickly the crabs get to the bait after I drop the pot down onto the bay or the sea floor. And I gotta tell you, it only takes a couple minutes, and sometimes within 10 minutes, there are dozens of crabs trying to go after that bait. So the old theory of waiting 20 to 30 minutes to pull your crab pots kind of goes out the window with that information, but the only way I got that information is using that underwater camera. So if you have an old GoPro or something that's waterproof that you can stick in there, start doing that, get some great information, and then utilize that to your advantage. Now, hack number 2 is great for those that don't want to be bending over and dealing with crabs, and that is to build a platform so that you're standing more upright and it's easier to process the crabs. For most of us recreational crabbers, we have to bend over or we process our crabs on the floor of the boat. But if you can build a platform or something that's more elevated up so you're not having to be on your knees or bend over, it makes it easier to process the crab and also put your crab trap on there so that you can maneuver it around, put new bait in there, get your keepers out of there, throw the non-keepers back. It makes the processing and process much easier. And it doesn't have to be the biggest or baddest platform. It just has to be something that's going to be super functional and super usable, like the one that my uncle built recently, so that you can just use the pulley system, move the crab trap right onto it, and then start processing really, really easily. So now that we've gone through tricks and hacks 10 through 2, well, what's number 1? Well, that is to customize and make your own unique buoy identifier. Now, one of the things that I see out crabbing a lot is people driving around trying to figure out if this is their buoy, if this is their buoy, is that their buoy? They forgot where they dropped their gear, and they're driving around like confused, aimlessly trying to find their crab trap. Now, one of the ways my wife and I have made our traps unique is attaching an old duck decoy that we painted to each one of our crab buoys when we've gone out. It makes it much more easier to identify, and you know where you've got which of your crab pots. So if you got something you can attach to your buoys to identify much easier where your gear is, I highly recommend it. Paint them up, make some cool nifty designs, have some fun with it, get the kids involved in making these fun customized buoys, and you'll have a much easier time identifying your gear and picking your crab pots up much easier. So there you guys have it, 10 hacks and tricks to help you catch more crabs and be more efficient when it comes to crabbing. So thank you guys for watching today's video. Don't forget your Attractant, and I'll see you guys on the next one. And as always, the outdoors is a gift. Share it with others.